Hello and welcome to another edition of my Become Unstoppable series. Now, I'm going to let you into a secret. This interview with Charlie, we did try and do this when we was in Thailand. So it is technically still part of my Thailand series, but unfortunately the quality of the video was disgustingly bad. So I've asked Charlie to come and we're going to do it again, but in Blighty this time. But technically this is my Thailand special too. So Charlie, would you like to introduce yourself, my lovely?
Sure, yes. My name is Charlie Ray Smith. I am an investor and an entrepreneur, and I run a couple of businesses. I've been working on one of my businesses for 10 years now, and I'm sort of currently looking to expand and potentially take on other businesses in the near future as well.
Wow, amazing. And we'll talk a bit about that as we go along because we're going to find out, obviously, your journey and your story. But for those who don't know me, I'm Julie Fitzpatrick, the founder of Millieside Therapy and Coaching. And my passion really is supporting stressed out people, business owners, professionals who are really lacking in confidence. And I help you to find the root of that and get your mojo back so that you can become unstoppable. Now, when we release this, obviously you'll have my details and you'll have Charlie's details too. So by all means, contact either of us with what element you might need help in. So Charlie, as you know, I have to ask all my guests what does being unstoppable mean to you?
So being unstoppable means to me that, whenever you get challenges, you have to overcome them. And for me, that kind of works in a few ways. So whenever there is a challenge, obviously, like your sort of first initial reaction is to have maybe a negative reaction. So maybe you get angry or depressed or frustrated or whatever it is. But it's about acknowledging that that's a normal reaction, but then taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture, and then working out how you can deal with that challenge. And there's definitely a philosophy that says that with every challenge is just an opportunity that you haven't discovered yet. So often a challenge is there to help you grow, help you maybe make something in your life a bit more organized and efficient, or learn a new skill or whatever it might be, to help you overcome that challenge, or even like maybe change direction or change the model of what you're doing so that it works better in whatever the new situation is that you're now experiencing.
I love that. And that is so true. And it's very much about if you're feeling really comfortable and you don't really get any much going on for you, that you're not pushing yourself hard enough. Because it's great to overcome fears, but once you've overcome fears, you need to kind of go, okay, what do I want to do next? And then you have to kind of hit those little uncomfortable feelings again, don't you? But you know that you've got that past experience then to go back on and go, look, I did this before, I can do this again. And look how good I felt after it. And it is, like you say, it's all part of building up who you are really, because unfortunately, if we don't go through things that are challenging, upsetting, etc., then actually we're going to struggle to really have a good story. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Is to live our life and create these great stories for ourselves.
Yeah. And you often you often might compare yourself negatively to someone else and think, oh, they've got a perfect life, everything's going well for them. But the reality is probably that you don't see the full spectrum of everything that they're going through and the challenges that they're facing. And so if you sort of focus too much on that false ideal, then you can get a distorted view of what's actually happening. And many times in life, perseverance is really important. So you might get a knockback, someone saying no to you for some reason, or not wanting to buy your product or your services. But at the end of the day, just because someone says no doesn't mean that everyone's going to say no, and doesn't mean that the next person you ask isn't going to say yes. So it's being able to realize that when you get those negative responses, or that people don't want to buy your product or buy your service or whatever it is, then they, that's fine. That's their choice. They're missing out to a certain extent. But you can go on and it doesn't actually matter that someone says no. It's just a part of the process, and you can continue on asking more people.
Yeah, and we get that as business owners, don't we? Like I spent in the end 35 years in the corporate world, right? So when I set up my business, it was the first time really that I had to sell something that was mine and I was offering, and it was really, really challenging. And sometimes it still is, because you get it's easy to get caught up in the emotion of the sale, isn't it? And oh my God, they didn't buy it. Oh my God, maybe I can't eat this week. I don't know. But you can't get attached to that sale so much, can you? And there's a lot of psychology around all of that, isn't there, that we've obviously learning when we do all our training.
Yeah, exactly. And that's very similar to where I was when I started my business. So like I was working in a job. It wasn't so much a corporate job, but it was in, working for someone else in a business. And I've been doing that for many years. And then I decided to form my own business. And one of the first things I had to do was get on the phones and start calling people and asking if I could rent their properties from them as my business, which, at that point had just started. It had no history. There's no, no past history for me to rely on that I can talk about and as a sort of proof of concept or anything like that. So I just had to rely on, on myself. And I remember the first day I sat down and started calling people, and I think I called like 4 or 5 people, and I think it was like the first few calls, like I didn't get through to anyone, or the right person wasn't there, so I didn't really have any like rejection. And then I called someone, I like pitched my thing, and then they said no, and that was the first no I got. And it did shake me, like I put down the phone.
What do you mean no?
I put down the phone and was like, right, I need a break. So I went and made myself a cup of tea, and took a moment just to reassess myself and have a deep breath. But then I got back and started making phone calls again. And then I think within like the first hour or so, I got my first viewing, and yeah, not long before I got my first property. So yeah.
How did it feel for you, like when you were sitting there knowing that you had to make those calls? How did it feel in your body? Can you remember? Like, can you remember how that felt?
Well, I'd done a lot of thinking about that, because I mean, when I was starting to do that, I was quite apprehensive. I'm not a person who's naturally imbued with confidence and super outgoing person. I'm very much like like happy to spend time by myself or whatever it is. So I knew that was going to be something that I needed to overcome. So I had to think sort of quite logically about the situation. I just thought, right, well, it's just picking up the phone, speaking to someone, saying some words into the phone. I sort of broke it down into a very sort of functional kind
tiny
of
bits. Yeah.
So like picking up the phone, speaking some words into the phone, and then someone's going to tell me their response, and it's either going to be yes or no. And I thought, well, as long as I keep speaking to the phone and keep doing that and keep saying the words, and because I've taken training on how to run this business and how to set it up and all that kind of stuff, like I knew that what I was taught works. I know that other people had done it, so it had that. So I knew that had a bit of confidence in that from other people, as it were. So I knew that I just had to do it, and also knew that like whatever I thought, sometimes we have negative opinions of ourselves. We think we sound strange or look strange or whatever it is, and I knew that people had done this, and they had they had accents which weren't English accents, so they're obviously not the standard normal accent for people. And so if someone can do that without having like a proper accent, as it were, then it must be possible for more or less anyone to do it. So yeah, I had that kind of like sort of intellectual understanding of the reality of the situation beforehand.
Yeah, because one of the modules in my group training program that I'm in a pilot phase at the moment, because that's all targeted at it's called Your Breakthrough from stress and lack of confidence to inner peace and clarity, right? And the the biggest part of that is teaching my clients about how the mind works and about how we're all hit by fear, because most people know, you know, we're fearful. It can be fear of failure, fear of success, fear of scarcity, not laxity, scarcity. But like you say, even confidence and anxiety and things like that are all fear-based, right? So when we're fearful of doing something, it's what's going on in our heads, right? So our head is telling us something, isn't it? So your head probably was saying, oh my god, what if they say this to me? What are they going to think of me? What if I say something wrong? What if, right? But actually that is your imagination going wild. So our biggest the only thing that we can control in our life is our thoughts, actually, which is quite interesting alone. But our imagination is the most powerful tool that every single one of us possesses, right? And the good news is it is free and we can use it as much as we like, right? But most people, me included, we use it in a negative way. So when we, like using your example of being on the phone, that would be your imagination would have just been running wild. How amazing was your imagination then? It would have been, oh, you know, like we said. But actually, if we turn that around and use your example again, using our imagination in a really positive way, it would be, do you know what? I'm so excited. I'm going to pick the phone up in a minute and I'm going to get my first sale. And I get, you know, and you change it all around and your energy levels are so much, well, the vibration's higher, isn't it? And you're more likely to make that sale. Yeah, sure, you're still going to get hit, you know, setbacks from things, but setback is all feedback, isn't it? Everything that we do is about, okay, I didn't get that sale that time. So what could I do different? Well, maybe I didn't follow my script. Maybe I didn't come across well. Maybe I didn't have my pricing structure. Maybe I wasn't selling the dream enough, you know, and all this kind of stuff. So it's about hitting those blocks, isn't it? And working out what you can do. But the key to what I loved about what you said was I broke it down. So your thoughts would have been going, ah. So you've gone, hang on, let's just stop for a moment. Actually, I'm not even with the people in the room, right? So what's the worst can happen? They're going to hang up on me, or I can hang up on them if they're rude. You know, when you, what sort of breakdowns do you think you would do, even in that situation or a different situation, when you maybe felt that your stress, overwhelm, your imagination was going mad, but in a negative way? Can you think of another example, or feel free to use that one?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there are often times when, you know, our emotions get away from us and we sort of get into sort of a negative emotion, and it kind of affects our body, and you get all tense and stress, and you know, you feel like, yeah, you kind of feel a bit out of control maybe. And yeah, I mean, it's in those kind of situations, it's very important just to, for me, just to, you know, take a break, maybe lie down, you know, close my eyes for like 10 minutes, and just relax and just allow it all to you know, dissipate basically, and physically relax, to help, you know, take a break. Because like when you're in those sort of like negative patterns and those thoughts are running around in your head, you kind of need to break the cycle. You need to, because if you don't do anything, you just continue doing that and thinking in the same way, then it's only going to lead in a negative direction. So you need to take a break, you know, break that cycle, break that pattern, and you know, and take some time. I mean, like, I work from home. I work by myself for the majority of the time, and you can get a bit into your head in those situations where you're getting stressed or whatever it is. And so yeah, I just have to think, right, I'll need to take 10 minutes out now. I'm just gonna go and lie down or sit down somewhere and just have a break. You know, you've got to give yourself your mind time to recover. You know, pace yourself throughout the day, and that's normal. You know, that's part of being human. So yeah, I mean, it's great just to allow yourself, you know, time to relax, time to recover, and get out of those patterns.
Yeah, for sure. And again, with the program I'm running, it's everything is about getting people, I say getting people back to basics, but some people have never actually done it. So it's about really understanding that actually stress is one of the biggest killers there is, right? And it can cause physical conditions like autoimmune disease, high blood pressure, diabetes, skin conditions, right? Loads and loads of things, right? Because if we don't take time out for ourselves, our body's continually under this heightened stressed alert. Now, a little bit of stress is good for us all, as in a little bit of fear is okay as well. But we don't want our bodies to be continually in that fear, fight, flight, heightened state all the time, because it will break. And I can remember, I don't even know where I got, someone said this to me, but I've always remembered it. Like, you kind of imagine that your body is just full of chains, like the link chains, right? Now, when you're well and looking after yourself and you're taking time out for yourself, you're exercising, eating healthily, doing all the good stuff, right? Those links are really, really strong and really hard to break. But when you're not looking after yourself and you're really stressed and your body's in that heightened state, they're going to break. So imagine you've got these broken links around your body, and that's when all the disease and illness kind of like seeps in. And I actually visually, I found that I could see that. I could see a chain and then it broken chain, and that's when, the negative energies come in. So in your story, right? Because obviously you're a successful business owner right now. Obviously, you haven't always done that. So do you want to do a little bit about your story, about how you ended up doing, being where you are now, and what kind of stresses and things that you've had to overcome along the way?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, in my previous life, I was working as a project manager for like a digital agency. And so, like, creating websites for like blue chip clients, like big corporate names. And I'd been doing that like on and off for quite a few years, like probably like 10, 15, 20 years, something like that. And it was a good job and it paid well. And I was, doing well with that. But what I found was that like I'd be saving up some money and then I'd go traveling for a bit. And I did some great traveling through like India and Asia and South America. And that was really enjoyable. And then I'd come back and I'd get another job and I'd only get money from that. But then after traveling for a while, I kind of like felt like I did all the traveling that I wanted to do. And I was kind of happy with that. So I didn't want to go traveling again. And then what I kind of realized was that I was actually doing the traveling because I didn't enjoy the job. And the job, like I said, was paying well. But it wasn't something that once I decided not to do any more traveling, I was thinking like, well, I actually don't want to do this job. I want to do something else. And I wanted to do something for myself. I didn't want to work for some other people. So what I did then is I started looking around for some other opportunities and some, looking at businesses, and I was looking at property as well, because I had kind of like a friend of a friend who's in property, and he was doing quite well. And I thought, well, if he can do it, because he just seemed like a normal person, like regular guy. I thought, well, if he could do it, then I could probably do it. But I don't know how. So I started getting into like research and education and training and finding out about property. And through all of that, I discovered rent to rent, and using a house and turning that into a multi-let property, like an HMO as it's known. And I was actually living in a multi-let property myself at that time, so I was kind of familiar with the whole kind of idea, the concept, and so that was something I was very comfortable with in that sense. So yeah, so I thought, well, that sounds like a good thing. So I did training specifically in that, and then once I did the training, I thought, the training was pretty good. It was very much like a step-by-step thing, and I thought, this is great. Let me go and start implementing it. I started implementing it, and yeah, very quickly I managed to kick off my rent-to-rent journey. And in the first year, I had 6 properties, and went on from there basically, and that went very well.
So at some point then so when you started your business, was you still working in your paid job and you were doing it alongside it, or did you cut your ties from that straight away?
Yeah, so I actually quit my job because once again, I'd saved up money, so like the job was paying well. I'm not that materialistic, so I don't really spend lots of money on things. So luckily, yeah, my living costs were relatively cheap. So yeah, so I'd saved up money again. I quit my job, and then started the business. So I
Mm.
had enough money to transition over, and
Mm.
that was a good sort of.
And you mentioned there that you started finding out how you could do that. Now, I know obviously you've invested in yourself because that's how we met. We met at a business retreat last year in Thailand, and then obviously we were all together again this year. So, what's your thoughts and feelings around how important it is to actually invest in yourself if you want to move forward, whether it be personal development or business development?
Yeah, I think it's really essential. I mean, basically, um, no one is entirely, self-created.
Mm,
Every self-made person has done their own education and received their information
mm,
from somewhere else. So I mean, it's essential, really, and it if someone is at a level higher than you, or further along the path, or knows
mm,
more about whatever subject it is that you're in yourself, then it makes sense to learn from them. Because
mm,
I mean, yes, you can learn from trial and error and making your own mistakes and learning from those, but it makes much more sense to get that knowledge quickly now and learn from it immediately, rather than spending however many weeks, months, years learning the same stuff,
mm,
um, and slowing your own progress because
mm.
of not getting that assistance.
Yeah, and from a business perspective, I mean, when my story was I was working in the corporate world and I got made redundant in the pandemic, and that's when I kind of, or I hadn't been happy for a long, long time, but that's when my journey started. So it did kind of take something, I don't want to say terrible. I mean, it felt terrible at the time because it was like, God, what am I going to do now, sort of thing. But I got over myself pretty quickly because I was like, I think I probably manifested that anyway because I hadn't been happy. But I was on 3 months' notice period, and it was like, I'm not going to volunteer that in the middle of the pandemic, am I? So I think, you have to be careful. This is another thing about the power of our imagination, right? We're manifesting all the time, whether we like it or not, right? And most of the time, unless we're really into self-development, right, we're manifesting negatively. And I was
Mm,
like, oh, I can't stand this job, so boring. So the universe has gone, oh, okay, we better do her a favour then and we'll make something happen. So you do
mhm,
have to be careful. So I'm really glad that it did happen because that's when I started my journey. But I had to go back to work at that point though, because I didn't have the finance background,
mm,
the financial background to support me. But it was good though, because I actually manifested. I went because I was a project manager, funny enough, but in the finance world. And I went, do you know what? I really want to get another contract that pays really well, but isn't too daunting to take up too much of my energy. And that's what happened. I got two amazing contracts that I was able to start building my business on the side, which was
mm,
brilliant. So not only was I working full time, but I was retraining myself. So I was learning NLP, master NLP, rapid transformational therapy, and other therapy training. But at the same time, I had not a Scooby Doo about business because I'd never
mm,
been when you kind of become institutionalized in a way, don't you, when you work for people? Because it's, yes, sure, you should sell yourself, I suppose, but I had the limited belief at that point. I didn't think I was good enough anyway, so I didn't. But
mm,
um, I didn't have a Scooby Doo about running a business, and I didn't I didn't really do social media. It was weird. So I I was doing. I had to start getting a mentor to help me build my business. So without all of those things, I wouldn't be where I am now. I
mm,
probably would have given up, if I'm honest, ages
yeah.
ago. Because actually, I don't know about you, but many people go, oh, I'm going to be a business owner. I need a better work-life balance so I can do all the stuff that I want, have the freedom. But guess what? That doesn't happen straight away, does it?
No. I mean, in any business, the hardest you're ever going to work is probably when you're starting the business up, because that's when you're responsible for everything, absolutely everything. You'll be
Exactly.
running the business, creating the business, marketing the business, doing the sales. You'll be fulfilling, the product or service or whatever it is. And so that's actually the hardest part of the whole process. And, as is a quite well-known stat is that, most businesses fail in the first year, and then most businesses fail, something like 90% of businesses fail in the first 5 years. So that's like the hardest business. I mean, like,
facts, isn't it? Yeah.
to get a business from like 0 revenue to like 500,000 revenue, that's the hardest part. To get from 500,000 to 1 million is actually easier, because at 500,000, you know what you're doing to create, sales, and the machine is basically proven and working, and now you just got to scale up. So you've got to get more leads, or get more staff, or whatever it is to be able to increase the numbers. But the real challenge is at the start. So when people say, oh, I want my own business to have my own work-life balance, that may come further down the line, but it's not going to come at the start, because that's when you're going to be spending all your time working, basically.
Yeah. And funny enough, at the weekend, my husband and I, we were out trying to get the garden a little bit, in a decent state. And I realised last year, I don't think I did any. I don't even remember being out in the garden hardly at all. And it's starting to look a little bit tatty. And I said to him, like, it's because before I would have spent a lot of my weekends and stuff out in the garden pottering around. But last year I was just working mainly, and I didn't want to, and I didn't mean to. But like you said, there's just always so much to do. And by the way, I'm not condoning that. And I'm not, because it wasn't ideal. And funny enough, on the retreat that we've just been on with Big Business and Assets for Life, one of the things Adam did was that when we did the pie about working out the percentage of your time, like working. And I remember, I mean, actually, it's making me feel a little bit emotional now, actually, for some reason. But I got really tearful in there, because I was like, oh my God, mine was disgusting. The element of work. I mean, if you imagine a pie, I mean, I would have said probably 3/4 of my pie was like working in some shape or form. And that's terrible. And even though I know this stuff, that, I say to my clients, you got to take time out for yourself. You can't do. Sometimes you have to take a look at yourself, don't you? Because it's easy to tell other people than do it yourself. But I did get a little bit better at it. And since I come back from Thailand, I'm much, much better at it. But even recently I found myself, and I'm like, no. And at the weekend, I could have easily have come and done some work, but I didn't, because I wanted to get the garden done. But what I did was I was listening to a podcast, or actually an audio book it was actually. But actually it helped me get unstuck about something, because this is the thing we were talking about earlier, right? When you're constantly on the go and you're not giving your brain time out to stop and think, it's just all like this all the time, isn't it, right? And sometimes if you want to resolve something or come up with an idea or something like that, you have to stop. You have to, so that you can create space in your head and allow your imagination to,
Think for
work.
itself.
Yeah. And when I was out in the garden, I was trying to resolve this particular issue, and then it just came to me, and I was like, oh, that's what I need to do. It's like when you're in a shower, or if you've lost your keys or something like that, isn't it? And you can be frantically running around the house. Oh my God. And then you stop worrying about it. You stop thinking about it. And maybe you're in the shower or something like that. And you go, I know where they are.
That's all right.
You've done that before,
exactly.
I can tell.
Yeah. Well, what I find is, like, when I'm doing something which is not work, whether I'm, making some food or whatever it is, like suddenly I'll remember something, or I think of something. So either I remember, oh, I've got to do that and I've forgotten about it. And so I'll make a note and make sure to get back to it. or I'll suddenly realize, yeah, to solve that problem, all I need to do is X, Y, and Z. And it's because it's very hard it's hard to be objective about yourself when you're in the moment, in the middle of everything. So in order to be objective, you need to detach from the day-to-day running of the business or the day-to-day work that you're doing, and step out of that, be separate from it, allow your mind to sort of relax and your subconscious to process through everything. And then it will start to throw up, suggestions or ideas or concepts or solutions that you hadn't previously been thinking of because you've been too busy working on the surface detail to be able to take the step back and see the bigger picture and work at it on a higher level.
Yeah, exactly right. And I call it being too busy being busy, right? And I was a master at that, especially when I was in the corporate world. Like, well, come on the weekends. What are you sitting down for? We haven't got time to sit down and watch telly. Come on, we've got to get this done. And I didn't allow myself to relax really, because I always felt guilty, because there was even having fun, come on, we've got to schedule some fun. Everything was always, come on, we've got to go and do this. And that's just wrong. But that, we can't help it. No, I'm going to reframe that. We can help it, but what we have to do is realize that we're doing it, and understand why we're doing it. So I call it, part of my program actually, it's called the Busy Blueprint. Why am I like that? Well, I've built that up over time. It can be learnt behavior as well. It can be stuff that we've learned in our childhood, like maybe if our parents were always on the go, or maybe you didn't feel good enough, so you always felt that you had to be doing more just to keep up with everybody. Maybe you've got that perfectionism in you that I've got to keep proving myself. Well, who are you trying to prove it to? And that's when we need to go into our subconscious mind and really understand what our belief systems are and what trapped feelings and emotions we've got as well, because that's running our blueprint. And that's what we have to do. We have to stop. And that's what I work with my clients, is really get into the root of what's going on underneath. And once we can identify that, then we can change it. And then you can start living your unstoppable life, really.
Yeah. And I think that's true. I mean, it's quite interesting because, like, that stress or anxiety, it can get overwhelming and get too much, and that's really important to be aware of that. But on the other hand, at the same time, it's kind of like a motivation and a drive and a rigorousness that you have in your life to help you to remind you to keep pushing forwards.
Yeah.
And I guess the thing is, it's when that gets too much where we need to take that sort of step back and relax and assess about where what we're doing. But I always find it useful for myself if I'm feeling anxious, or too anxious too much. I mean, as well as taking the breaks that I mentioned earlier and relaxing and having time to do that, there's also good to think of if you think about how the anxiety helps you, and it's not to say that anxiety is a good thing, but if you switch the perception of the anxiety of being stressed and worried about things going wrong to seeing it as a motivation and a drive and making sure that you're heading in the right direction, doing the right thing. Once you sort of reframe it in that way, it actually becomes less stressful. It becomes more powerful in a way. And so I find that, like, often I'll just sit down, I'll just write down, okay, I'm feeling anxious about something, or anxious in general. I'm thinking, well, how does this help me? So it helps me because it makes me check I'm doing everything right, and it makes me, make sure that I'm heading in the right direction, and make all this. And once you start writing those reasons down, the whole kind of emotion, the feeling, just transforms into something a lot more beneficial and positive than having like the sort of stress of anxiety.
Absolutely. And it's about tackling those thoughts again, isn't it? So imagine, your imagination is going, when you're anxious, you're fearing stuff that hasn't happened yet, probably isn't going to happen. So your mind, your thoughts are overthinking. So everything starts with a thought, right? So we have to take that thought. And I love what you said about writing it down, because that's what I would recommend as well. Right? What are the thoughts that are going in your head? Yeah, get a bit of paper, put a line down the middle, write down all the things that you're stressing about or worried about or anxious about. And then it goes back to what you said earlier about breaking things down. Well, I'm scared I'm going to make a fool of myself. Well, are you really? You know, like say you're going to go and do a presentation and you're really anxious about it. Oh God, what are people going to think of me? Oh, what if I mess up? What if I do this? What ifs, right? Well, if we were to flip that, what if you turned up and you was amazing? What if everyone was hanging off every word that you said and they loved what you were doing? What if, because you put yourself out there, that you had loads of clients come out on the back of it? You know, what if it was the best day of your life?
Yeah. And what if you,
yeah, go on.
and what if those concerns that you have are actually not real? I mean, what if you go out there, do what you can, like as best you can in that moment, and what if that's actually good enough or even better than good enough? You know, that might be great. So, because often we think about things and we'll criticize or, you know, think negatively about certain situations, but often those negative thoughts are not reality. Those are just thoughts that we have.
Exactly.
And someone else with exactly the same skill level as you, like, you know, exactly the same level of charisma or personality or presentation skills or whatever it is, so exactly the same person as you can go out there and do like exactly what you can do, but because they don't have all the negative thoughts and they're just thinking, you know, I'm going to do this, you know, and maybe it'll work, they have a much more positive experience and they still get, you know, good results out of it.
Exactly.
But having all the negative thoughts up front don't necessarily, you know, isn't reality, doesn't necessarily serve you, and can hold you back from actually doing that, which would potentially get you good results.
And also, when you're doing that presentation, if you're not enjoying it, you're cutting off your flow because your head's too busy thinking about what's your, you know, I could be talking, we're talking now, right? People watching this, I could be sitting there thinking, oh, what if they think my hair's a mess? What if they think, well, I don't like what she's wearing? What if they think I'm talking a load of rubbish? And that could take over this interview, couldn't it? And then I'm like, I don't even know what Charlie just said because I'm too busy worrying about what people just said. And then you end up messing up the interview because you're not focused on what your guest is saying, you know? So it can actually, and it raises, it limits your vibration and the whole experience. If you're not enjoying it, why are you doing it? Because, and that's the biggest thing about being a business owner, and it getting caught up in all of the stuff around it. When you get to the point that you're not enjoying the journey, you need to take a look at yourself and, you know, reverse that back a little bit and go, hang on, why am I doing this? What's my why? Why did I start this? Because at the moment it's not feeling very nice. But then, like for me, right, when I've had days like that, and I'm like, oh, do you know what? It'd be just easier just to go back to work. I know what salary I'm getting every month. I haven't got to worry. I can go and buy the things that I need and not be worrying about money. But then I'm like, but in that job, I didn't really get the satisfaction. I didn't have my purpose and passion. Now I've found my purpose and passion and I love what I do. And then if I feel a little bit, then I'll just go and watch some of my video testimonials when they're saying to me, like, Julie, you saved my life, or, you know, without Julie, I wouldn't be doing it. And then you go, oh, that's my why. That's what I do. That's why I love what I do, because I can help people transform their lives. And this is where the unstoppable thing comes from, so that they can live an unstoppable life.
Yeah.
And that's what I want for people. I want them to know that you don't have to live in a life of scarcity. You don't have to be anxious all the time. You don't have to lack confidence, you know, and don't let all these psychological and physical conditions end up perhaps being the death of you. And I know that sounds really dramatic, but that is a fact. If we don't start taking time out for ourselves and really understanding what's going on underneath, then we're not living a fulfilled life, and maybe we're cutting our life short. And there's no need for it.
Yeah.
Get off my soapbox now. But I think that's called passion, right?
Yeah.
You know, And it is, and that's what it's all about, doing something for you that gives you that purpose and passion. And I never had that in my corporate life, really. I say that, I mean, I had some good times, don't get me wrong, and I've made some great friends from it and everything else, but the actual work never really did it for me. But you know, that's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, Charlie, unfortunately we're coming towards the end now, so thank you so much for being an amazing guest, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. But before we go, do you want to just do a shout out for what you're up to and how people can find you?
Yep. So like I said, I've got a rent-to-rent business in London, which takes properties and makes them into HMOs. So if you need any help with running HMOs or renting properties, then definitely get in touch with me. I'm also looking, if anybody's wanting to sell their rent-to-rent business and it's based in or around London, then I'd be interested in hearing from you as well. But if anyone's got any questions or they want to ask me anything, then by all means get in touch with me on LinkedIn, and I will be happy to pick up anything and respond to you there.
Lovely. And as I said, I'm Julie Fitzpatrick from Millieside Therapy and Coaching. I'm on most of the social medias, Facebook, LinkedIn and Instagram. But I also have a YouTube channel called Millieside Therapy and Coaching. So if anyone's interested in watching this video plus all my others, and I've got my client videos and client testimonials on there as well, please go over to there, like and subscribe, and I'll keep trying to present you with some wonderful guests with some more unstoppable interviews. So thank you so much. And remember, this is a Thailand special. Just in Blighty due to technical issues, but actually this interview is much longer and much more fulfilling actually than the one we did in Thailand, because we were too busy getting bitten and we cut it quite short, didn't we? But thank you for being an amazing guest, and I look forward to bumping into you again soon. Take care and enjoy the rest of your time off this weekend. Thanks
Thank you,
a lot.
Julie.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.